What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and I'm back with another discussion. There is no right or wrong answer style video here. So what I wanted to talk to you about today was the concept of missing players. I don't know why I have headphones on. But yeah, missing players, absent players, someone who can't make it to the game. What do you do? How do you handle it? Everybody goes about this differently. I've done it a handful of different ways at my table. I've seen it done a handful of ways at different tables. But I want to know how you do it, because you guys never cease to amaze me with your creativity, and someone always has something new that I've never heard of before and never tried. And a lot of the times, it might be a better way to handle it. So if you've got a better way to do it, I'd love to hear it. So before we dive into that, though, I wanted to talk about our returning sponsor and friend of the channel here, Describe, who, by the way, has been nominated for 2 different Annie Awards. So if you do vote in the Annie Awards, they would really appreciate it, and I would appreciate it as friends of them and the channel. If you would go drop your vote there, they're nominated for Best Online Content and Best Aid/Accessory in the digital category for the 2021 Annie Awards, which is pretty sweet. And, you know, they also do massive giveaways every month. So here's the current giveaway for August. You can get a Gen Con pass for either this year or next year. You can get a full hero membership to Describe, map packs, hook up with merch stuff from Mr. Rex, a whole bunch of awesome stuff, and that's all free to do. And like I've said before, Describe, it is also free. You can use Describe to have that pull that finely crafted box text from their whole team of writers, and a bunch of it's available for free. And if you do decide that you want to upgrade and get the hero subscription or some other subscription out there, you can use the coupon code NERDIMMERSION in the link in the description to get 10% off of your first purchase. But I did want to point out that they have over 3,500 plus scenes, and they've even started to add things like insults that you can use in-world insults to throw at enemies or other characters. And this one is, "You're barely worth the spell components it would take to kill you." And I think that is beautiful. I love that. There's a whole insult category that you can click on. I don't know if there's more than one. Oh, there's a whole bunch. Look at all this. So there's a whole bunch that you can pull from to use if you want, which is really awesome. So thank you, Describe, for sponsoring this video. I will also take this time to say, hey, if you see this number right here, it says 77.6 thousand subscribers. That's how many of you out there have subscribed to Nerd Immersion at this point. And I'd love to hit 100,000 I was hoping by Gen Con, but now I'm going to say maybe by the end of the year, so that, I could have a nice little Christmas present. But all it is really a simple click for you to subscribe to the channel, and it does go leaps and bounds to help me. So, channel stuff out of the way, let's talk absent players. How do you handle it? Probably the simplest way is you just don't play. That one sucks the most. I think we can all agree with that. Everybody agrees we're going to play on the 25th of the month. 2 days before, day of, hours before, something comes up, Timmy can't make it. Well, that sucks. What are we going to do? I don't know, guys. I didn't really plan on this. Maybe we just cancel for tonight. Maybe we all just hang out and we'll play video games or play a board game. And, maybe Timmy can come back next week and that'll be that. However that works. That's the simplest one. Nobody's feelings gets hurt. Nobody feels like they missed out on anything. We skip the game that time. But obviously, this is one of the things that can lead to the, not to scare you, but this is definitely one of the things that can lead to the end of a campaign, where you start missing sessions, and if it keeps happening, that can do the things where D&D games do, where they just sort of dissipate into the ether, and no one knows how it officially ended, but it just dissipates. So that's one option. Another option that's pretty common is somebody else controls that player's character. Whether you call it piloting, Jaegering, taking over, whatever you want to call it. Someone else, I'll give you 2 options for this one. Player, another fellow player at the table, takes over control of that character so that the character moves along with the party and does what they need to do. And sometimes I've seen it even in my personal games where the other character, the person playing them, will even go to the point of trying to voice act like that character and really play them out. But I'd say for the most part, they don't end up doing major story beats for that character. Usually they're there to just kind of, for combat more often than anything, is to keep things balanced, and you have that extra person for combat. But for the most part, I wouldn't try to have them make super key story decisions, because it would suck to have that done to your character while you're not there. And then the other option could be the DM takes over instead of the players. Now, the DM has a bunch of moving parts going on. They're managing all the NPCs, all the enemies, and the storyline. So adding a whole other character on top of that does add more to their workload. But maybe you and the DM have some like fun stuff that you've been working on about like character reveals or backstory stuff that you want to allude to, and it just hasn't come up. And that could be a good thing because the DM's aware of that, whereas if another player plays it, you don't want to have to be the DM and be like, actually, they wouldn't do that because of this thing you don't know about. So if you're the DM and you're doing it, you might be able to make decisions or at least steer them in a direction that, you know, you guys were hoping to get to, but now you have the option because you're kind of controlling the character. I'd also be wary of that, right? You don't want to do anything too difficult or too crazy or out of the, you know, way out of line with that character while they're not there. Because, well, yeah, it might be fun to decide that Timmy's character goes and sells all of his magic items at the shop and then gives the rest of the party all of the gold. Ha ha ha, that's funny. When Timmy shows up next week and wonders where all of his magic items are, and you say, oh yeah, well, I had control of your character last week, and I made you sell all your magic items so that we could have more gold. Timmy's not going to be too pleased, and frankly, Timmy, don't play with those people. They're assholes. Go find a different game. But yeah, so I would highly recommend you don't do something like that. Same thing with like killing the character. Obviously, you want to have the combat go a certain way if you get into combat, but you don't want to kill Timmy's character because when he comes back next week, you're going to say, oh, by the way, roll up a new character. We killed your character last week. And it's just like, I mean, he might have died anyway, but it sucks to not be there to defend yourself. So if there's ever a scenario where the party's going to split, have Timmy be the one who runs away because he's not there to defend himself. That's really shitty to just kill off somebody's character while they're not there. And I highly recommend that you do not do that unless you've had a very explicit conversation with the player ahead of time where they're like, hey, if I can't make it, do whatever you got to do to my character. I really don't care. I still probably wouldn't do it anyway, but, you know, take that however you will. Another option can be that the character just doesn't travel with the party that day. They stay behind wherever the party was. So the party's in town A, or they just got, you know, they long rested in the inn, and they get up, and, you know, we'll use Timmy's character again. Timmy's character decides to stay in the town, and the rest of the party decides to leave to go off and do whatever they were going to do. Now that, in theory, sounds good too, right? But it poses a logistical problem if Timmy comes back next week. Now the party is God knows where. Timmy doesn't know, because his party's off somewhere adventuring, and he's still back in Town A. So how does he know where to go? Now, obviously, you can just flub this and say, Timmy, you know they sent you a message, they were in Town B, and he heads over there to meet them there before the next session. However that's going to work. But it can pose a problem where, you know, they're not there, and then you have to figure out how you're going to get them there. So that, I think, is definitely a good option if players are going to be gone for the long term, right? Like, if they're going to be gone for a month, 6 months, whatever it is, they might stay off and do their own thing. And then when they're finally able to come back to the table, they can fill everybody in on what they've been doing for the past however long, and that kind of can make sense. Another option is the player just kind of the character just falls into obscurity. Like, they're traveling with the party. They're not contributing to combat. They're not contributing to decision making. They're just sort of there. And that the purpose of that is that when you do come back the next week, you don't have to deal with any of the stuff that I just talked about. Why am I have no spell slots? Where is my, thing not, whatever the case is. And in my experience, when that happens, the players usually have a lot of fun by being like, man, you were so quiet last week. It was like you weren't even here. And they have that kind of fun little joke before that gets old. But that's usually a thing that happens as well. So those are kind of the primary things that I'm aware of, other than them like being yeeted out of there by like a god who's just like, hey, cleric of mine, come with me and go on this specific mission for this 1 week's session worth of time. And then I will drop you back off at your players with the rest of your party next week when you're back at the table. You know what I mean? Which I guess is technically an option, but that it depends on the scenario, right? What, is it possible for that stuff to happen? Yes, it just depends on the character and can you make it seem like it fits within the scope of the world. So those are pretty much all the ways that I've either seen it done or done it myself. And for the most part, I'd say they'd worked well. But I'll also share with you the current situation that I'm in and why it sucks and why I don't really have a great way to go about it. So if you're unfamiliar, I have been streaming, whether on Twitch or here on YouTube, for the past 6 years, every Tuesday night, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, of a variety of different campaigns. All of the early pre-written campaign stuff, pretty much all the way through Tomb of Annihilation, and maybe a little bit after, I ran all of those, or have played in all of those. They're all here either on this channel or a secondary channel, Nerd Immersion Plays. But, you know, we've been playing in a homebrew campaign of mine in my homebrew world for the past 3 years straight. We come out to somewhere around 120-something episodes with breaks and people can't make it and babies being born and things like that. But, you know, about 120-some-odd episodes. And we're really in the end game of that campaign now. The party's like level 17. We're maybe 20 sessions away from the game being done. And, like, we wrap that campaign and move on. But unfortunately, at this point, due to real-life circumstances beyond anybody's control, and, you know, with one of my players can't make it, and it sucks. It's the worst. Because, you know, we went remote for most of the pandemic. You know, the early part of the pandemic, we went remote when everything was really crazy all through 2020 because we didn't want to risk it. And then, you know, there was no vaccines weren't available and all that kind of stuff. And then as things started to calm down, although they've started to ramp up, as I'm sure you're all aware, as they started to calm down, we eventually transitioned back to playing in person. And it felt good to do that, obviously, because it was good to see everybody. But at the same time, it's coming up to the end of the campaign, so it's nice to have the energy of everybody being in the same room and we can build off of each other as we come to round out this story we've been telling together for many, many years. And like I said, I won't get into the details unless you guys tell me you want to hear it in a future video, but there's a variety of different heroes that they've been gathering as part of this big prophecy, and they've been playing as different characters that they've had over in other campaigns and other things like that. But they finally have gotten back to the original 3 characters from the start of this campaign 3 years ago. And they just went on like a 15-day boat trip to end on like a volcanic island chain where they're going to do like their final mission for this prophecy. And we just got to the island, like to the volcano island chain, like the ship just pulled into port. And that was the last session before, unfortunately, this scenario came up where we couldn't have one of the 3 key players back to play. So what we've done is decided to put that game on hiatus. And currently, we're streaming again here Tuesdays on YouTube, a 2-player. So my campaign is me as the DM and 3 players. And now one of the other players decided to run a 2-player game, me as one of the players, and then the other player. So with 3 people, but a 2-player campaign. In the interim, so we're still playing D&D, there's still content on the channel, but that way we don't dip into that campaign, the original one. And we don't know how long that's the other part, right? How long he's going to be gone is a question mark. We really have no idea. It could be 3 more weeks. It could be a year and a half. We have no concept of that. So right now we're playing in this 2-player game, and we're trying not to think about that. So I don't know how long this game's going to go. We're only 4 sessions deep so far, but it could be a 6-month campaign. It could be a 3-month campaign. But our plan currently is play in this other game until, and hopefully in this time he'll be able to come back, and then everything's good. But if this campaign ends and he's not back, then we're faced with this conundrum. Do we make something else up and continue on with the hopes that he'll finally be able to come back? Or do we do what nobody wants to do and just try and finish it out without him there, which seems just wrong and off? Just not have him there and just finish out the campaign without him so we can at least close that chapter and move on. Like I said at the beginning, there's no right or wrong answer to how to do this, but this is a scenario that I find myself in. And yes, while we could do like put up a computer, like a laptop or some sort of computer screen, and have him maybe virtual in, possibly. We're not even sure if that's an option. But then he can play with us. We really said, like, while we could do that, and we thought about the option of everybody going remote again to deal with this, but we ultimately decided that we wanted to keep it as an in-person thing because we started in person years ago and we wanted to finish it in person. But yeah, it's just a really crappy scenario that I unfortunately find myself in, and I don't have any right or wrong answer, which is why I'm curious to see how you guys handle absent players at your table, because maybe you have some, magic bullet solution that I don't know about that'll fix everything. In this particular instance, I'm going to say probably not, but, maybe you do. Yeah, I don't know. I just want to know how you guys handle it, because I am genuinely curious, because like I said, what I've seen and what I described in this video is pretty much the only things that I've ever done or the only things I've ever seen done, but that doesn't mean, like I said, that there's not a better option out there or an alternative, and I'm nothing if not open-minded to other styles of play and other means of, handling difficult situations. So, anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.